May the Lord give you his peace. We now start class 4. I apologize that we got cut off in the last class talking about Bonaventure. Our high-tech technology does not allow us to tape any longer than 20 minutes, so I have to be careful to make our classes 20 minutes long. So I apologize for our abrupt closing to last class, where we were speaking about Saint Bonaventure, his Vita Prima, that's his Legenda Majore, the major legend that he wrote, and how he had to weave around the difficulties going on in the order. But St. Bonaventure also had to prove that Francis had the stigmata. We forget that the stigmata was brand new during Francis's day. No saint previous to St. Francis had the stigmata. We're so used to hearing about the stigmata and Padre Pio with the stigmata and this one and that one. But Francis was the first saint to receive the stigmata. And Francis didn't show it to many people. And so there was this doubt going on, like, did he really have the wounds of Christ in his hands, his feet, and his side? And so Bonaventure has to collect testimony and witness to say, yes, it is true. He had the stigmata. It was true. It is true. And actually now we Franciscans have the feast of September 17th as the feast of the stigmata of St. Francis. So Bonaventure had to prove that. Now, he stayed away from political controversies and things going on outside the world of the friars. It's not his concern. He was concentrating on the mysticism of St. Francis. Now, this writing is filled with cliches. You have to understand that when Bonaventure's writing, he likes cliches. And you have to understand that it's part of the style of the writing. So when he writes stuff like, all churches are deserted. Were all the churches deserted? Was nobody in Christendom going to Mass? Of course they were going to Mass. Was every church deserted? No, it wasn't. All churches weren't deserted. It was a manner of speaking that Bonaventure is employing in his writing. So he also says that one always prays with great fervor and devotion. Does everyone always pray with great fervor and devotion? No. But should we? Yes. But Bonaventure's putting it in there as a way of kind of a teaching element, you know. Two other cliches. He talks about that St. Francis always prays with great humility and that he is the perfect model of all virtue. Now, we'll see that Francis was human. He was a man who was growing in virtue, growing in holiness, becoming that model of virtue, becoming that model of humility. And so we'll see how that grows to that. But Bonaventure puts him out there as the perfect model of all virtue and always asking everything with great humility. It comes to a truth at the end of Francis's life, but it's a progress. So you have to keep that in mind when Bonaventure's writing, that he is putting out there the model of what we all should be. Okay? So, it is written with a certain scoring. It's meant to be read aloud. So this was meant to be read for the brothers at the refectory table during the octave of the feast of St. Francis. Yes, St. Francis's feast day used to be 8 days long. And every time the brothers went to the table, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, they received a reading of the life of Francis by Bonaventure. It was written to be read in the refectory. Okay? And it's garnished with the Song of Songs. In every chapter, you're going to find the Song of Songs, that beautiful book in the Bible, which is the love story between the beloved and the beloved. So the story of the lover and the beloved. And Bonaventure brings this into the life of Francis to show that St. Francis was a man who understood himself to be loved by God. A man who knew that God was in love with him, and a man who fell in love with God and is seeking to love God in return. And so the entirety of Bonaventure's works is garnished with the Song of Songs. Okay? Then Bonaventure writes another book, his Legenda Minore, his minor legend. And this minor legend of St. Francis was written to be read at the divine office. So as the friars went to the divine office 7 times a day during the octave and feast of St. Francis, there was again the readings of the life of St. Francis. So the friars were hearing the smaller legend in the chapel and hearing the major legend at the dinner table every day for 9 days. The feast and then the octave afterwards. Because they want to be renewed in the understanding of Francis and the life. They want to be, rejuvenated with the life of their seraphic father. And so it's a shorter text, this Legenda Minore, divided into 7 chapters and 9 paragraphs. It's a remarkable density where spirituality, theology, and history are all fused together. So you have the spirituality, theology, and history all brought together as one. as only Saint Bonaventure could do. He's a master author, phenomenal. Okay. Now we look at the next early biography we have called the Legenda Trium Sociorum. Legenda Trium Sociorum, or better known as the Legend of the Three Companions. I've already mentioned this once before. This is Brother Leo, Brother Rufino, and Brother Angelo. So once again, Brother Leo was that constant companion of St. Francis, an early follower who was Francis's confessor. He was a priest. Rufino, who was Clare's cousin, very close to St. Francis, one of the first to follow Francis. And then also Angelo Tancredi, who used to be a knight, who gave up his knighthood to be a follower of Francis, truly a follower of the gospel, who was very, very close to Francis as well. And so these were the three companions that got together, that brought their memoirs together, and then presented that to the Minister General, the General Chapter, from which was written the Second Life of Thomas of Celano. And we mentioned how at the end of 1244 chapter in Genoa, Crescensis de Jesi directed that all the friars make known to him in writing all that they might know with certitude concerning the life and miracles of St. Francis. And so Leo, Rufino, Angelo responded by submitting what is now known as the Legend of the Three Companions. In 1768, the Bollandists attempted to undermine that this was written by the three companions. There's a question to whether or not the cover letter belongs to this writing or to another. The cover letter dates 1246, written in Genoa, which places the work earlier than Second Celano and earlier than St. Bonaventure's writings. 1/3 of the legend is composed of textual extracts from Celano I and Julian von Speyer. Now, you won't find Julian von Speyer in the old red book brick I showed you, but you will find his writings in this compendium of works of Francis in the new volumes published by New City Press, Francis of Assisi, the early documents. Okay, so anyway, so it was never considered an official legend, nor was it written to be so. And it jumps over 2 years of Francis' life from numbers 16 to 17. I find it to be one of the most beautiful writings because you can tell it's the memories of men who knew Francis. Although that information is used by Julian of Speyer and used by Celano, it's certainly written by three people who knew Francis well. Now let's look at the next one. We talk about the Legenda Antiqua, the ancient legend. This is a compilation of Perugian, or it's also known as the Legend of Perugia. The Legend of Perugia. Perugia was the city, kind of north of Assisi, that we know had this ongoing confrontation with Assisi. It's where St. Francis was imprisoned for the year that he was in battle. They were fighting at the city of Perugia, in his early youth, before his conversion. He's locked up in Perugia. Francis eventually established a friary in Perugia, and certain friars, such as Brother Giles and Brother Leo, were stationed in Perugia. And so this writing comes from Perugia, so we call it the Legend of Perugia. Simple enough, right? So, and the author is considered to be Brother Leo himself, Francis's companion, which makes this such a beautiful and remarkable writing, because this is coming from somebody who would hear Francis' confession. Not that he tells us anything from the confessional from Francis, but it's coming from a personal experience. Okay? So, Brother Leo was privileged to witness St. Francis's life, especially in latter years. He was his secretary, his infirmarian, and his confessor. Part of Leo's writings were written in the form of scrolls. And Ubertino of Casale, who wrote in 1305, said that one book is in the closet of the friars in Assisi. He talked about this book that was in the closet that was written, and it was found. So the work is not complete. Notebooks 11, 12, and 15 disappeared. So the Legend of Perugia is a compilation of Leo's notes, compiled in 1311 by Ubertino of Casale. So these are Leo's little notes that were put together, some written on scrolls, to compose the one book called the Legend of Perugia. The manuscript is divided into 5 parts. It comprises 21 numbers, composed of 4 paragraphs of 2 Celano. It comprises 20 numbers entirely borrowed from 2 Celano. It has comprising 12 numbers, and and then 32 numbers particularly unpublished, and so forth. So there's a lot in there. So some would say that that he borrowed from Celano, but it could very well be that Celano used it. We're not sure. Okay? It's not a political writing. He wasn't in there trying to throw his hat in the ring with the fights of whether or not we should observe the rule one way, observe it the other way. This is just the memory of a friend. This is just Brother Leo remembering his friend. This great disorder, there's no plan, is that without concern for chronology, and he has a tendency to digress. So you can tell it's just a friend writing about a friend. He's not looking to write some sort of a extraordinary book. He's just writing about a friend. So there's recurring expressions that Leo likes to use. At that time, he also says, and the brothers of those days were not like that of these days. So, he's kind of like throwing out these he has little shots he's putting at some of the friars, The brothers of those days, unlike the brothers of these days, So it's the most authentic eyewitness account and the most vivid we have of St. Francis. Okay? Now we look on to the Speculum Perfectionis. Speculum Perfectionis, or the Mirror of Perfection. The Mirror of Perfection. So different manuscripts make it difficult to settle on a date. 2 manuscripts are found in the north, place the writing at the year 1227, while manuscripts from the Friary of Agrisanti and Florence place at the year 1318. So we're not sure how early is this writing. If it's a 1227 date, well then it dates earlier than Celano. If it's 1318, it puts it in a much later time. The 1227 date is believed to be a mistake by the copyist. Okay? So all the manuscripts begin with, this work has been compiled in the form of a legend based on what companions of Blessed Francis had formerly written or caused to be written. Okay, so this must be the memory of the companions of Francis. It has 124 chapters. All the material is borrowed from other texts. There's nothing in this we're not going to find anywhere else. And the author describes himself as a spiritual. That means this is a very polemical writing. The spiritual, as I mentioned, with that group of friars who want to observe the rule spiritually. Now, in our day and age, when we think about observing the rule spiritually, we think about observing it kind of loosely, more liberally, not being so faithful to what Francis meant. In the days of Francis, when they used the word spiritual observance, they meant literal. We're going to observe it the way Francis said it, period, end of story, sine glossa, no gloss, no explanations, we're doing it. And that was a group of friars known as the spirituals. So the author of this manuscript says, I am a spiritual. It's a polemical writing. So he's putting it out there, boom. Okay? Now the last writing we're going to talk about in depth, or in a little more detail, is I Fioretti di San Francesco, the Little Flowers of St. Francis. This is a very, very, very popular book. You can still find it to this day on so many different shelves being published. This has all the fanciful stories we love. And actually, Rossellini, the great movie producer in the 1950s, made a movie based upon this book. He was going through a conversion experience and decided that he was going to put out there this movie, which is just little chapters, little vignettes of the life of Francis according to the Fioretti. So it's written around the year 1330 AD. So we're talking 104 years after the death of Francis. This book is written. It's in the middle of the spiritual crisis, 1270 to 1340. Brother Ugolino had an intimate friend, Brother James of Massa, who had known Brother Leo, Maceo, Giles, Juniper, and Simon, as well as St. Clare. Okay? So this book is claiming to be like a third-hand witness. You have Ugolino, who's writing it, who's a friend of Brother James, who knew Leo, Maceo, Giles, Juniper, Simon, and Clare. And so it's kind of a hand-me-down book. They're passing along the info to the next generation. Okay? All these companions would have been dead by 1280. And yet here he is passing on that info. Okay? From James of Massa, Ugolino heard many fascinating stories not included in the incomplete official biographies of Celano and Bonaventure. So at this time, 1330, only the major legend was approved. So that's all they were reading at that point was the major legend by Saint Bonaventure. Remember, they told, we're going to burn those other writings, and the friars kind of hid Celano behind them, you know, so the officially. So James of Aguilino is writing this, you know, from his memories of James of Massa, who learned it from the other guys, as a way of kind of reigniting the fire of getting the reformers back to, getting the brothers to come back to living the life as St. Francis gave it to us. Okay? So that's the Fioretti of St. Francis. Again, a beautiful, beautiful writing. That's where we hear the stories of what is perfect perfect joy. So we get the stories of a lot of the animal stories come from the Fioretti. A lot of beautiful stories of Brother Juniper and his antics, and quite a lot of fun. So if you want a really good fun reading of Francis, certainly turn to the Fioretti. All right. So other important documents that we need to just know about when we're studying Franciscan history. One is the Chronicles of the Franciscan Friars, Chronicle of the Order of Friars Minor, written by Blessed Giordano of Giano. This was written in 1262. It's important for the order's growth in the German countries and the East. Jordan of Giano, he didn't want to go to Germany. When the friars were being sent to Germany, he stood up to say goodbye to them, and he wound up getting volunteered. And he even admits that he didn't think St. Francis was a saint until after Francis was canonized. So it's kind of comical. But Jordan writes that for us to understand the foundations of the order. Then we have the Chronicles written by Thomas of Eccleston. It was written in 1259. And this is the history of the order in England. And then we have the Chronicles by Salimbene of Adam, written 1282 to 1288, written by Salimbene of Adam. Then we have the Legenda Assidua, and this is written by St. Anthony of Padua in 1232. Then we have the Historia Septem Tribulationum Ordinis Minorum, or the history of the tribulations of the order of the 6 tribulations of the Order of Friars Minor, written by Angelo of Clareno. And this is written between 1323 and 1325. Now, the document produced by the leader of the spirituals was put out there to show that the order needed reform, and that those who try to initiate reform get persecuted. That is the history of the Franciscan order. You want to start reform, you're going to get persecuted. It's just the way it rolls. Expect a tough ride. Okay? So the order's first century is seen through the prism of the persecutions suffered by the authentic heirs to the Franciscan ideal. Okay, that's the basis of that. All right, I'm going to touch something here on our screen. Okay, we're continuing now. So, then we have the Chronicle 24 Generals by Arnaldo of Sarant, where he chronicles the first 24 generals, which is compiled in the year 1365. It contains a wealth of biographies and other information. Then we have the De Conformitate Vitae Beati Francisci ad Vitam Domini, or of the conforming life of Blessed Francis to the life of the Lord Jesus. This is written by Bartholomew of Pisa between 1385 and 1390. The conforming life of Blessed Francis to the life of the Lord Jesus. The ultimate expression of the idea that the life of St. Francis was a reenactment of the life of Christ. So it's valuable statistic information here. But it's a beautiful writing by Bartholomew of Pisa because he's showing the ultimate expression of the idea that the life of St. Francis was a reenactment of the life of Christ. And this is where we get that sense of Francis being the Alter Christus. So we'll pick up in our next class on the history of Assisi, and we'll see St. Francis in light of his own time and culture as we look at Assisi and the city that gave us this beautiful saint, Assisi's most favorite son. May God bless you and Mary keep you. Amen.